Now, this deal did not come to fruition because of their incredible on-screen chemistry or any collaborations they had done on SNL up to that point. Lorne Michaels simply saw the way that David and Chris interacted around the SNL offices, constantly ribbing each other in a friendly manner, and wanted to figure out a way to capture that dynamic on the big screen.
But the under 5 crowd seems to love them.
The fact that one of the movies in this deal ended up being made, let alone 2, is nothing short of a miracle. Tommy Boy, which was originally titled Billy the Third, a Midwestern, wasn't even fully written when filming began.
We started with 66 pages. We had no second half of the movie. We had no idea
You started
how it
filming
ended.
with only 66 pages done.
Yep.
But the improv skills of Chris and David, combined with the writing talents of Fred Wolf, resulted in one of the most beloved comedies of the 1990s that people are still talking about nearly 30 years later.
Son of a...
By April of 1995, the 2-year window on that 2-picture deal was coming to a close, and a follow-up to Tommy Boy had yet to be written. So Paramount turned to Fred Wolf to write up a draft screenplay, threatening to sue him if it wasn't completed before midnight on Sunday, April 30th, 1995. The significance of that date being it was the day that Chris Farley was allowed to get out of his contract with the studio, which he was eager to do because Chris was at the time being eyed for the part of Amish Boy in Kingpin. Meanwhile, Columbia Pictures was interested in making him the star of an up-and-coming, light-hearted buddy comedy called The Cable Guy.
You'd be surprised how many customers treat me like snot, like I'm a goddamn plumber or something.
But the 45-page Black Sheep script Fred Wolf came up with in just a few days didn't impress Farley all that much. While he was willing to eventually do the movie, Farley wanted Paramount to push back production on Black Sheep until summer of 1996, so that in the meantime, himself, David, and Fred could punch the script up a bit before production began. And of course, he could go off and do either The Cable Guy or Kingpin. Unfortunately, now that they realized just how bankable Chris Farley was, Paramount put extreme pressure on him to shy away from both of those roles. But even if he had gotten his way and Black Sheep had been pushed back, a starring role in The Cable Guy never would have happened. By that point, Columbia Pictures went behind Chris's back and promised Jim Carrey $20 million for the role. And on top of that, the studio essentially paid him not to star in the movie. But David Spade was convinced that, much like their experience on Tommy Boy, they'd be able to punch up Black Sheep as it was shooting with improvised jokes and rewrites by Fred Wolf during production. The combination of David's reassurance and pressure from Paramount was enough to convince Chris to push everything else aside for Black Sheep. But any plans of executing the movie in a similar way to Tommy Boy just didn't happen. Tommy Boy director Pete Siegel was busy working on, ironically, a different comedy with a political angle, My Fellow Americans. So for Black Sheep, Paramount called upon Penelope Spheres, who had experience working with SNL talent, including Chris, as the director of Wayne's World.
Next stop is St. Louis. He's gonna come back through Chicago on his way to Detroit.
You know, for a security guard, he had an awful lot of information, don't you think?
After pitching the loose plot concept to Penelope, she wasn't really all that interested in directing. But Chris told Paramount that he wouldn't do the movie unless they had a director lined up that he was actually interested in working with. Because they got along so well in Wayne's World, Penelope definitely fit the bill. So in a moment of desperation, they promised her a salary of roughly $2.75 million. Because Penelope was making more money than David Spade and Chris Farley, her decisions outranked theirs. So she immediately brought in 2 writers to gut the script completely and replace 40 pages with their own revisions, stating to Chris and David, "I know how to make you guys funny." To make matters worse, Penelope refused to hear Fred Wolf's suggestions, let alone speak with him. So he ended up being fired from the movie on 3 separate occasions. Paramount was desperate to get this thing made, and losing the director meant losing Chris Farley. So they pretty much let her have complete control of the movie. Chris would also, in his own spare time while shooting the movie, hold punch-up sessions with some of the writers who went on to do Almost Heroes. They would sit for hours trying to improve some of the jokes or bits he was going to perform when he returned to set. Even with those revisions, Chris's feelings on the film didn't change. He was not confident that this movie would be good. But according to those closest to him, he was going to go down swinging.
I'm alright.
Black Sheep revolves around the 1996 Washington State gubernatorial campaign between Al Donnelly and incumbent Evelyn Tracy.
Hi, man.
Vote for Donnelly.
On Al's side is his oafish younger brother Mike Donnelly, who has a heart of gold but a brain thicker than mud honey.
Rock the Vote presents Mud Honey.
I didn't say mud, I said crud.
And his clumsiness tends to get the best of him.
Hello, Miss Onaker?
Realizing that his brother's involvement is only going to get in the way of a smooth landing for his candidacy, Alapoint's campaign aides Steve Dodds to essentially babysit Mike for the remainder of the election.
Your brother told me to drop everything, come down here, and kind of get you organized for the final push for the big election.
Team Donnelly gonna kick a little Tracy Bond.
The basic plot structure of Black Sheep is nearly identical to Tommy Boy. Lovable buffoon is saddled up with a straight-laced assistant whose main priority is keeping the buffoon in line. But the buffoon eventually proves everyone wrong by uncovering some sort of conspiracy and uses some kind of weapon to give themselves the opportunity to unravel the villain's devious plot. But those similarities were completely intentional, because with Tommy Boy, Paramount didn't know what they had. So they figured they could dupe the public into seeing another very similar movie that this time they would actually back with a decent advertising budget in hopes that it would explode at the box office. Between the two movies, I've always preferred Tommy Boy over Black Sheep.
Bullshit!
How can it be bullshit to state a preference?
But Fred Wolf and pretty much everyone else who was involved with both films has stated that Paramount took way too much of a hands-on approach with Black Sheep. I'm guessing they asked for more scenes where Chris Farley screams his head off, no matter how stupid the setup. A good example being the moment where Mike gets his thumbs caught under the hood of his car. I'll admit, because it's Farley and he was just so damn charismatic, the scene still gets a laugh out of me. But not even a minute later, this moment is completely overshadowed by a much funnier physical comedy bit where Mike gets his tie caught in the trunk of an elderly couple's car.
Folks,